Hi everyone, I'm Chris, founder of Fitness Geek. Welcome back to our YouTube channel where I give you some tips and some guidance on how to maximise your training in a number of different ways. Remember, if you really like our content and you find it useful, please like the video, subscribe to our channel, and you can stay up to date with any future content that we post. Today we've got a real important topic, and it's about intensity versus volume, and basically how to maximise the short time we all have in the gym to get the most results for our training goals. And firstly, let's look at some of the science behind it. So lots of research has shown that when you are training with a limited time to train, intensity becomes your key weapon. So the variable we can really tweak to get the most out of our training is the intensity. So the intensity of the stimulus of our training. And I don't necessarily mean that means a super high heart rate all the time. So it doesn't necessarily mean your traditional high intensity interval training where you have to be working super hard on an assault bike or a rower, pushing your heart rate through the roof. Some of that is important, but by intensity, I mean the level of effort we put into each of our movements and each of our sections of work. So an example might be, a real life example might be, you have 20 minutes and you want to do some squats. So you could do 10 sets of 5 back squats, but you keep it nice and light. So you rest very little time between each set. You might rest for about a minute in between each set. And because you've got a very minimal rest, you need to keep the weight quite light. And there you've got through a high volume of squats. However, if your goal is to get stronger and to improve your squat strength, which usually it is if you're looking at smaller sets, like sets of 5, doing 6 sets of 5 with 2 or 3 minutes rest between each set allows you to keep the weight higher and push the intensity of each set. And by intensity, I mean that if you're doing that set correctly, that set of 5 should be heavy. You should need 2 to 3 minutes rest to recover before you can go again for another set of 5. So sometimes doing more volume within that time isn't always what you need if the stimulus and the focus of that session or what your training goal is after, and usually as part of a well-rounded functional fitness program like our Everyday Athlete program, lots of our squat and deadlift and our strength work is a strength focus, so you would be taking more rest but making sure the intensity of that set is high, and that's what I mean where the most results come from pushing the intensity. So really use the rest periods that are prescribed, take plenty of rest, but actually make sure that if you are taking that rest, the intensity at which you perform that movement is high. So the loading is high, time and attention, movement quality is high. Functional fitness is all about training movements that mimic everyday life. So a squat, a hinge, a squat is getting up and down out of a chair, a hinge might be picking up bags off the floor. And actually, if you're pushed for time, functional fitness training will work a wider array of muscle groups. So something like a squat or a deadlift, for example, will work a lot of muscles in your lower body and your back and your lats, as opposed to those who've got lots more time in the gym might want to do a bodybuilding type focus. If you were doing a bodybuilding focus, you could get away with just isolating your quads and let's say doing a leg extension on the machine, or an example might be splitting it per session into particular muscle groups. So you might be doing bicep curls, you might be doing something on your triceps. That sort of training will give you muscle growth, but it also requires a lot of volume and a lot of time spent because you need to work through every muscle group in almost in isolation in the body and spend a good amount of time on it. Whereas something like a clean and jerk or an overhead press or a back squat as a functional compound movement will work large muscle groups. And generally, if you're tight for time in the gym, so say you've got 2 sessions a week and you've only got half an hour in each session, if you just focused on squatting and overhead press in session 1 and then deadlifting and pull-ups in session 2, those big compound movements would get you the most intensity and the most return for your investment of that small amount of time. Now here's a real good tip for you, particularly for those of you that have, again, limited time. Supersetting movements that work opposing or different muscle groups can work in functional fitness. An obvious example is something like a push and a pull. So let's take bench press, predominantly a pushing movement. It's going to work your triceps, your chest, You could do bench press, so 5 sets of 5, and for that you would need a 2 to 3 minute rest period. However, in that rest period, you could do your pulling movement, so you could do some pull-ups, and because those muscles, because the pull-ups are going to work your lats and your biceps, because those movements are both working different muscle groups and they shouldn't elicit a super high heart rate response, you could squeeze in push and pull as a superset to really maximise your time. Personally, I think that is useful when you're short on time, but I think, like we said before, if you're back squatting really heavy, you should probably need that 2 or 3 minutes rest from doing anything just to really recover. But if you're short on time, a really simple one, find 2 movements that work totally different muscle groups so they don't interfere with each other, so your bench press isn't going to fatigue you for your pull-ups and vice versa. That is a quick way of pushing our session together and squeezing in some lifting in a short space of time. We've already talked about quality over quantity, so intensity is our friend when it comes to maximising our results. How that relates to our Everyday Athlete program, we don't go at super high intensity every day, so there are up to 6 sessions a week that you can follow. A couple of the sessions are low impact zone 2 training or interval training, and we do a lot of strength work, so we don't necessarily push super high and super hard all session, but there are what we'd consider like metcons or metabolic conditioning workouts, which are a mixture of lifting, gymnastics, cardiovascular activity all thrown in together. So when your training in your session requires intensity, so when you're doing something which is to be performed at high intensity, it might only be for a short period of time, might be for 5, 10, 15 minutes, the intensity with which you perform that work has a huge impact on the fitness gains that you make. So an example being, you could spend 30 minutes getting through a workout that has calories on the rower plus some dumbbell snatches plus something else. You could move really slowly, take lots of rest, the weights are relatively light, and you get through a 30-minute workout and think, oh, actually that felt easy. Fine, you've got through the volume of work, but you haven't got the intensity that drives the fitness. So pushing through when you've got lactic acid flushing through your system, going into that dark place where it really is painful and it's going to push your heart rate up, force your body to adapt, that's where you get the results. So that's why you don't necessarily need to slog away for an hour in a workout and do a long endurance piece to get fitter. Doing 5, 8, 10 minutes of a metcon workout at super high intensity will give you the results that you want in terms of fitness gain. So to summarise, intensity is your friend. So when you're short on time, really make sure you're pushing the intensity of each exercise you're doing, pushing the intensity in your workouts. Rest time isn't wasted time, provided you use it to hit the next set of lifting or work with the intensity the highest intensity that you can. Think about supersetting opposing muscle group movements. So a push and a pull, for example. Avoid supersetting movements that have the same muscle groups at work, unless that is the goal that you're getting, which is muscular endurance. If your focus is strength, then opposing movements to give you the intensity on each of those movements. If you're short on time, be intentional with your warm-ups, intentional with your warm-up sets. Otherwise, quality over quantity will always win out in terms of functional fitness. If you've got any questions or you want to look at our Everyday Athlete program, which is a well-rounded functional fitness program, just drop me a message. Otherwise, keep working hard and speak to you soon.